Welcome to today's episode of Bright Brainz. I'm your host, Isaac, and today we're diving into a timely and crucial topic: the potential declassification of marijuana as a dangerous drug by the Biden administration. As discussions about cannabis reform heat up in the United States, it's important to look at the experiences of our neighbors to the north, where cannabis has been legal since 2018. Joining us today is Mick Riggins, a Canadian bartender who is in his 40s and has been an on and off smoker for the past 20 years. And he has seen cannabis reform take place in Canada, and he wants to give us the inside scoop. Through this conversation, we hope to gain insights into what the future might hold for the US if it follows a similar path. So, welcome to the show, Mick.
Hey, thanks so much for the amazing and fantastic warm welcome, Isaac. I'm really happy to be here and excited to discuss much of what you did as a on and off again cannabis user. Absolutely. So thanks and great to be here.
Awesome. All right. Tell us a little bit about the whole journey of legalization in Canada and how it's affected you. So it's been legal since 2018.
Absolutely. You touched on the legalization of cannabis, which came about in Canada at that time through the Liberal government. It was beforehand, and I will discuss when I did smoke when it was illegal and such. And we also flirted briefly with times of decriminalization as well. So even though my smoking habits may be what a typical pot smoker would be considered, probably moderate, even low to moderate, I went from the same thing I would purchase through 20 years, we'll say. The same thing would go from being something I would get a ticket to I would get locked up to nobody would care, to it would be legal, to the government would be selling it, to now they're licensed someone else to sell it. And it's all the same thing, all along those lines, except all those things have changed. And that's probably the thing I've seen most in these last 22 years of smoking, we'll say.
So let's talk about what it was like pre-legalization.
Absolutely. So I will say, as a marijuana smoker user, I actually started a little, what one would be considered later in life. I didn't actually start smoking marijuana until my second year of college, which ironically was for police foundations. I am not a police officer, didn't become one, went a different way. But just getting back to that, so my relationship would have started, actually, it would have been when I would have been 20. I was always a little aware, and you'll hear about brain development and such. I was always a little bit afraid of marijuana, even bought into a lot of the propaganda. I was actually, quote unquote, afraid of it. I thought puff, puff, and I would die. But the times I did try it, especially through studies, again, I was police foundations. I don't feel great about that. It was illegal then. So it would have been early 20s. Tried it a few times. Right around when I tried it the first few times, the provincial legislation, so Ontario, was flirting with decriminalization, meaning it would still be illegal, but it would be more of a ticket depending on the amount and such. And generally would be looked at in the States, you would probably call that a misdemeanor, whereas here it would have been going from an indictable offense to a summary offense. So basically a ticket. And I saw that. And I've seen back and forth with different government change to now is very widely accepted and very legal.
So you say you started smoking when you were 20. Was it just for enjoyment, or did you have like any kind of health benefits or anything like that? Or
Great question. It was for a little bit of enjoyment. I did succumb to a little bit of peer pressure. Being in college, like I said, it was second year. I was always, I was in police foundations. I wanted to be a police officer. So it was a good year and a half for me going, no, 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 and turning the other way and just not really being into it, not looking down on it, just wasn't my thing. I knew it was an illegal drug, but I also knew there was a lot of other things out there. I wanted to be a police officer. So it turned into, hey, sure, why not? Let me try that out. What's the big deal? And oh, geez, okay, I got it feels a little bit like being a little drunk. And at the time, too, with being a youngster, wanting to be a police officer, it was very physically demanding as far as they wanted you to work out a lot. That was great. They wanted you to work out independently. You had to always be getting ready for physical tests. And ironically, it was a little bit of marijuana that helped me sleep a few times. That kind of go went. Geez, I had a really great 8 hours sleep, and as a growing college student, then and now the sleep's great, and it just kind of turned into that very slowly until maybe probably a few years after that, I kind of turned around and said, "Oh, geez, I guess I'm a weed smoker. I'm a marijuana smoker." So that's kind of how it happened.
Did that affect your decision not to become a cop? Or do you ever regret not
Uh,
becoming a police officer? Or
so that did affect my decision not to become a police officer. I went from times of feeling like I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to do the testing as far as drug testing, even though physically I felt fit, mentally I felt fine, and otherwise, other than the fact that I did have some moral gray areas, I felt, geez, I shouldn't be doing this and want to be a cop. But I'm also like, well, people speed and they're cops. Like, I'm like, where do you find that line? And just eventually I fell out of it where no, I'm very happy to have I respect law enforcement. They do things that I could not do, especially doing the schooling and being interested in the law. I have the utmost respect, but I'm glad that I didn't. I do still enjoy smoking here and there, even though it's legal. And police officers can legally smoke now in Canada with certain restrictions, as it is a legal drug. But in the end, I'm glad that I didn't. But hey, different time. Who knows? It's always interesting to think like that. Different avenues and paths. But in the end, I don't have regrets to not being a police officer. Yeah, that's about how I'll finish off with that. I don't know. It's interesting to think about careers that you would have had after 20 years. I did enjoy police foundations. I even enjoy talking about it still to people who are in college. I just never followed through. And yeah, it's interesting to think about.
so it was illegal, and then around 2018, did it just become legal outright, or did it become decriminalized first? So I want to know basically what was the whole path and how did that path begin? Did the citizens of Canada did they push for it, and then eventually the politicians just caved, or
Sure.
what's the whole path that happened?
No, great question because it's very interesting and it's similar to what I'm seeing happen to my friendly neighbors down south in the U.S., although still a little different. So when I talk province, it is very similar to states down there. So it did start around 2018 would have been when it was fully legalized. For many many years, as early as 2001, it had been medically decriminalized and medically legal, so you could buy it with a license. And as years went by, it became a little easier to get these licenses, and these licenses were often paid for and such. But otherwise, it would have been very similar to the way in the U.S. it works, buying by the gram, by the quarter, and such. Probably about $10 a gram, whatever it would have been black market. You had gray market using the guise of medical marijuana. But where it really started is, you mentioned, in 2018 when the Liberal government, and that's also our current government right now, they actually they when they were trying to get voted in when they ran for election against the conservatives who were in power and very very tough on crime and very against any kind of legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. They ran on a platform of legalizing marijuana for personal use, the Liberals, and that was very popular with the citizens of Canada. They won the election in 2016. Justin Trudeau made good on his promise to make it legal, not decriminalize, but make it legal for, they're going to figure out a way. He created a commission between the federal government, the provincial government, and territories to basically say what's the best way we can do this. There were some hiccups, but yeah, by 2018, marijuana, there was shops, you could order them online, go to those shops, just kind of like a alcohol liquor shop here. We call them LCBOs, Liquor Control Board of Ontario, or just the beer store is the other one, but very similar model. And you also mentioned the period it's very interesting. The period before and during legalization is actually one of the most interesting periods you don't hear much about. Basically, as soon as people sort of found out, hey, weed's going to be legal, there's a lot of places that didn't wait for licenses or anything. There's places that just, popped up. So storefronts popped up. I refer to those as gray market. Within weeks for a good, I'd say, year and a half, a gray market shop existed pretty close to here. They'd get raided every now and then, but they acted with impunity. They had kind of their own. Everything was cash up. That was a kind of odd period where you saw that. And I believe that's actually similar to what the states see. You didn't see them every now and then they get shut down and raided, but they still act with impunity. And that was a good year and a half before legalization. And then those shops dried up, quote unquote, once legalization happened.
I live in Ohio, and
Okay.
yeah, they recently just passed a law saying they're going to legalize marijuana here for recreational use. But what happened is, I think that they didn't think it was going to pass, and so they weren't really prepared. They didn't have any kind of like legal, I guess like laws or anything written up. So this, I think, was in November of last year that it passed, and they're saying it might not actually go into effect until September of this year. And
I could
it's
see that.
really kind of, yeah, it's a real odd kind of place. But since it's passed, all of these smoke shops have popped up. I mean, you can't throw a stick in the air and have it land and without falling on a smoke shop. It's really weird. But they don't sell weed. They all sell this like what they call alt cannabinoids, which is like Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 11, that kind of stuff. I'm not really sure like what that is, or supposedly it's like it's like cannabis but derived from hemp. Are you familiar with this kind of stuff at all? Or
I believe now it might be the opposite, and I might be totally off, but I've heard that referred to as synthetic weed. Although if you're saying it's derived from hemp, that might be something totally different. So I might be thinking of something
yeah,
totally different.
I think the
Uh,
synthetic stuff is like K2 or whatever, or
okay.
spice. Yeah,
And that
which
seemed to be skirting the law. Yeah, that seemed to be trying to really just okay. So no, I hadn't heard of that's interesting. Like here we don't necessarily have to worry like I'll say there was a lot of hiccups with legalization, especially rates. Ironically, the day legalization happened, marijuana was actually extremely hard to find, and there was a good probably I'd say 3 months during the switch over. Literally the day, okay, marijuana is now the rules are you can have 30 grams on you for possession. You can grow up to 4 plants, but that's touchy and that depends on a lot of things. And that's basically it. They also made the laws for selling and for trafficking and for driving under the influence much more stricter. And that's the thing people think, hey, Canada made weed legal in 2018, 2019, such. Yeah, but we also made the other laws much more strict, and a lot of kind of people forget that. And there are some people who think the government kind of did the bait and switch, the here you go, but we're really going to come down. So I did see that too, but ironically, like I said, right during legalization, those literally the days of right when it happened, it was ironic that you couldn't find weed anywhere because the shops were initially run by the government, much like I said, much like the liquor stores are run by the government. That has since changed, but they didn't have the shops ready to go for the day of legalization. There were maybe two of them, and I'm talking Canada's capital. There were no shops to buy them at. And right before legalization, the government, very smart, they went around to all these gray market shops and they said, listen, we know you're acting with impunity. We let you do whatever. We've busted you a few times. In the next few months, we're going to be giving out licenses to let people open up marijuana shops. If you don't voluntarily shut down right now as a gray shop, you will be banned from getting a license. If you voluntarily shut down now, we will give you the chance to get a license, and that's obviously pretty appealing to them and effective. Although a lot of those gray shops shut down, including the one I was going to. So on the day of legalization, marijuana was really hard to find in Canada.
I can imagine. So, are you allowed to just like smoke outside? Like, if you just light up a blunt, walk outside, and just blow smoke in front of a police officer's face? Like, I mean, well, I guess maybe not blow smoke in an officer's face, but
I
are
follow.
you
I
just,
follow.
yeah, are you able to just smoke outside and just do whatever you want, or is it like what's the rules?
Here in Ontario, it follows smoking laws. Even though we have some pretty strict smoking laws, the smoking ban went into effect. Like as a bartender, I remember when there were smoking sections in restaurants. Now that does not exist anywhere in Canada, I believe. But pretty much where you can smoke cigarettes is where you can smoke marijuana. Now, of course, that also brings up, like a sporting event, you can go smoke a cigarette in a smoking area, maybe, but then, you can't obviously just jump into your vehicle. That causes another crime. Like that is another thing. And like you said, you couldn't just blow it into a police officer's face. That would probably be somebody, but you could put in front of it. But yeah, like, hey, if I'm walking, I'm trying to think of public street. Yeah, like myself, I enjoy it in the privacy of my own home. I don't have to worry about that. My apartment does have a no smoking restriction. However, that came into effect after, and I'm grandfathered in, and I'm respectful. But as far as the laws, yeah, like they generally they pretty much follow where you can smoke cigarettes. You will see some places you can smoke cigarettes with a big no marijuana sign, which is a new sign that kind of popped up with legalization, which is interesting. That I think when sign companies go, hey, we can create a new sign, that's something. But I have seen that, and generally also kind of follows where you can drink and where alcohol is allowed too. That's also kind of like it kind of overlaps with that because of beverages and other ways of consuming marijuana. And that's just something that's always being looked at in the news. And it's one of those nuances that it's always that legislation's always trying to figure out. There's a huge controversy in Canada with milligrams and doses and what should be allowed as far as edible and consumables.
Yeah. So, what has been the economic effect on Canada? Has there been like an economic boom? Has this helped create jobs, or has it been pretty much the same as it was?
I probably say it's pretty much been the same as it was as somebody looking outside in and looking. I'm not privy and not owning a weed shop or such. It was kind of looked at as being this big, hey, we're going to be the richest nation on earth and watch this if we do this. And some people also said the opposite. Hey, we're going to descend into hell and this and that, and everyone's going to be stoned all the time and no one's going to work. But I haven't seen a huge change. I know as far as looking at numbers, it's not been as much as they had predicted. And around where I live, there was a huge legal grow up that a company invested a lot of money into, and it didn't take. You can look it up. It's Tweed and Hickory, and they had to close down a lot because it didn't hit as hard and fast as people thought. And I also think more people were growing it as we're allowed, except for two provinces actually don't allow you to grow it, and that's actually controversial as well here in Canada. But and still more people rely on the black and gray market. So seeing some economical benefits possibly as far as the am I seeing schools or things being built or better roads based just on that? I can't say I'm seeing that necessarily, but as far as I've seen, looking into the numbers, yeah, it has been positive as far as tax revenue and revenue and such.
So, you said people still rely on the black market. Why is that? Is it just cheaper to get it from the black market? Because I assume that legally going to the dispensary, there's like a high markup.
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head with that. So the high market is one thing, although they have got better at bringing prices down without getting too inside baseball. And it might relate to other questions, but basically the way dispensaries have to buy their stock, the way they buy wholesale, has been heavily criticized and not really looked at as being that great of a model. Basically, it comes down to if I own a weed shop, I would have to buy from one particular wholesaler. But here's the thing: if you owned a weed shop and this other person, we'd all have to buy from the same wholesaler. And it's one pretty similar wholesaler, basically. So it's like it comes down to people wanting a little bit higher dose, more variety, not trusting that one source, not really wanting to buy from the government. And I mentioned how some milligram for edibles and consumables, the government has it capped at 10 milligrams, which is extremely low. Uh, Cannabis consumers think it should be at 100 milligrams per product, which is actually probably more realistic. So that also forces people to go to the black market. Some people just prefer anonymous cash straight up with the black markets. And I can't speak for this, but some people also will be consuming other drugs that are illegal and kind of doing some one-stop shopping with their said dealers. And I use the term dealer loosely, even though a marijuana dealer is a marijuana dealer. Like when I was buying marijuana through the black market, quote unquote, it was it didn't even feel like that. It was a friend who I would chill with, and then once a week I would give him a few bucks, and here you go. So it's changed that aspect. But I haven't. Yeah, I think that there are people have a variety of reasons for shopping on the black market and the gray market. We have a lot of native reserves and reservations and reserves up here selling gray market products and different milligrams. So there's a variety of reasons, and it's been very interesting to see it unfold over the last few years.
So I wanted to ask you about that, the native off reserve shops, and you refer to them as gray market. What does that mean, gray market?
Sure. I guess when it comes down to it, because I don't know exactly what they're following, what they aren't. So there is, I could drive to a native reserve, and right now they have their own legislation. They deal with it their own way as far as milligrams and such. Like I can go, I'd say it's Golden Lake is one about a 30-minute drive from where I am, and I can get high milligrams. They can sell without restriction on packaging, without restriction on milligrams dosing. They can sell edibles. They can sell me a cookie that has 100 milligrams in it. Whereas if I go to a legal weed shop right now, the highest thing they can sell me would be 10 milligrams. Now, sure, I could buy a ton of them, but it's gonna cost me $120, $140. That's Canadian, of course. Whereas the native shop's probably going to cost me $12 for that, and they'll probably give me a few freebies, and it'll just have a bit more of a relaxed, just more of a relaxed, probably be cash straight up, it'll definitely be no taxes, that kind of thing. Yeah, and then it's just looked at it more of a medicine. They might explain more of the cannabinoids. They might, ask, are you using this for pain? Would you prefer this for sleep? Or are you using this for this? They might be a little more in tune, whereas the legal pot shops feel a little bit more like a business, which they are. And when I'm saying the gray market, I actually, again, have this very unique, extremely odd. I never thought this would pop up, but very close to the legal marijuana shop that I have about, I want to say, 20 meters from my house, very, very close. The same strip mall recently, it's called what's called a native marijuana shop has opened up. It has very, very amazing two-tier security for getting in. They're strict about IDs, but they tout themselves as being native, tax-free, cash only. And they're also 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is also something I've never seen before. So it's an interesting time, and just seeing it, the 21-year-old, police foundations hiding from the law, thinking I was doing something pretty crazy and terrible, looking at now 42-year-olds seeing what I can see and do at any time. It's been quite the jump, and it has been pretty interesting to see it over time.
Yeah. So the off reserve native shops, they seem better than the legal shops. Why don't everybody just go to those shops? Like, what's the downside?
Sure, absolutely. So I've pretty much converted to them. The one thing they don't have is marijuana beverages. I do like the beverages. I find because beverages, the legal beverages would be 10 milligrams. So, two of those, it might give you a little bit of the same effect of a beer or two, and then you're not getting that and such. So that's one reason I might go to the legal shops. But yeah, some people. Well, first off, it is gray, and it might even be on the illegal side. Like, here's the thing. I would not be shocked if that shop were shut down or quote unquote raided tomorrow. I don't know. And they kind of don't know either. It's a very interesting, like I said, that's where where I would call it a gray market, because the law itself is gray. It's I they can sell what they want on the reserve. The indigenous population sometimes views, the entire land still as their land. It's different viewpoints. It's very similar, and it's not. Sorry, it's not similar to when you hear people with their sovereign government citizenship. You see that kind of stuff. I do believe there are legitimate claims here that you're not going to see the police go break them up. Yeah, I don't know. It's very, very interesting. Like I said, I trust their products. They're cheaper. I generally going there a little bit more as far as product information. It just seems a little bit more fun too. They've kind of, not that going and buying marijuana should be like going to Disney World, but it seems very sterile and cold. Some of the ways that the restrictions have been placed, where you can't have any kind of advertising, any of this, any of that. Which, hey, I'm fine with that. Let's keep anything away from kids to make this appealing. I'm fine with none of that. But you go into this place and you feel like you're doing something wrong. Some of these legal shops, whereas the native shop, I go in there, they got some tunes kicking, they got a poster, they had a jumbo inflatable marijuana doobie that you could buy and bring it to a pool party, like a big raft. It was a big joint. It was like $20. I'm like, you guys are gonna sell tons of those. This is hilarious. If I were going to a pool party and picking up a joint, I would literally buy this big inflated. It was already inflated. I'm like, all these little things they're able to do that the legal shops can't do, and it's like, can't have fun. That's illegal. You have to do this with legalization. You got to do this. You got to do this. And it's been interesting. Like I said, I've used that word a lot, but looking at it, kind of talking with you today has made me realize just how kind of weird and wacky it's become and how it is a business deep down.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but are you looking to reach a dynamic and engaged audience of curious minds? Well, look no further. Bright Brainz podcast is the perfect platform to showcase your business or product. You'll be able to reach a diverse and intelligent audience and engage with listeners passionate about personal development, technology, and more. Elevate your brand through thought-provoking discussions. Don't miss this opportunity to promote your business on one of the fastest growing podcasts in the market. Contact us today to discuss advertising options and elevate your brand to the next level. Contact us at brightbrainzpod@gmail.com to secure your advertising spot on Bright Brainz today. Again, that's Bright Brainz with a Z, pod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Now, back to the podcast.
And a lot of these little smoke shops they have here in the United States, it's like you walk in and there's like a big Rick and Morty mural on the wall and, glow in the dark Bob Marley posters and things like that. And yeah, I wonder a lot of this merchandise, I wonder if it's even legal merchandise. Like, are they, or is it just some guy making this stuff in his basement and selling it? What's the
Sure.
copyright thing going on? But you mentioned kids, and that was my next question. What is the effect on youth? Because since this is legal now, it's a lot easier for kids to get their hands on it. Has the rate of usage among kids skyrocketed? Because I know in Colorado it has, and it's become
Really?
kind of a problem. Yeah, because it's legal now, and kids are able to get a hold of it. They can have their brother who is an adult, go buy them some, and then they take it to school and they give it to their friends, and then they're smoking in the bathroom, and so it has gone up. Has something similar happened in Canada?
The most you've heard about youth being affected with it, and like first off, like I will say when it comes to education and education, propaganda, drug information from be it parents and everything. I will say I was heavily encouraged. While I think the war on drugs is overblown and such, the one good education and the one thing I did take to heart was smoking at a young age might affect brain stuff. So like while I'm pretty liberal with smoking and I think hey, it's legal and everyone should be their own whoever, I do think the law of most of Canada it's 19. There is a province that it's 18, and ironically Quebec, who are very liberal with alcohol, it's 18 to drink in Quebec. They are following the U.S. model of 21 for marijuana. Quebec is actually not as liberal when it comes to marijuana. You're kind of seeing that division. But anyways, getting back to your question with youth, I actually don't see as my, you kind of think you're going to be seeing kids walking around smoking doobs and vapes and bumping into each other. The two marijuana stores I'm close to are also close to some schools. And I was actually very shocked when the legal marijuana store opened up. I figured it would have had a little bit more restrictions to how many feet it would be from the school. No, it's yeah, it's an elementary school, and I believe there's a junior high not too far as well. When it comes down to it, I guess they didn't consider that. I guess, and when it comes down to it, there's no advertising besides the actual name with it's a maple leaf that's been kind of morphed into a marijuana leaf. That's very popular for advertising here, is the morphing of a marijuana leaf into a maple leaf because of Canada and cannabis. And so that's something that's pretty popular, that play on words and such. And but you don't hear much of it. I want to say maybe 2 or 3 times. It's almost maybe even become an urban legend, and I can't quote it exactly, but you hear about Halloween, how somebody snuck edible gummies, or gummies and worms are the popular ones that you see for edibles, and someone snuck it into this. Or you'll hear about maybe an unfortunate toddler got into their mother's purse and saw a candy, and they usually look like candies. And but I haven't heard of any youth dying or getting behind the wheel over high. So that is a positive thing, and I think that might kind of push back on the whole, like, look, when weed's legalized, it's going to destroy the world. Like, no, it's pretty much like that's pretty much it. When it comes down to it, it hasn't been anything huge where I'm seeing cats and dogs marrying each other kind of thing. It's just been kind of business as usual. It's been kind of remarkably plain, if anything, and it's been interesting to watch, but nothing. I will say, when touching back on youth, my one big issue that I did have, 420, April 20th, very very big day to celebrate marijuana, and here in Canada and possibly worldwide, that was generally a day where everyone would gather up on Parliament Hill, and you'd have it was a gathering where to encourage the smoking of marijuana, but also to encourage the legalization of marijuana. And I went a few times, and it was it was fun, and it felt very hippie culture and different people from all around, and a lot of fun, very positive, no yelling or screaming. It was technically, I guess it was a an illegal gathering but technically. But the one thing I did say about it, because they still do it, even though it's legal now, they still gather Parliament on 420. I do find too many youngsters smoking at those, like shocking young, walking around with joints, and that's where I'm like a little like old man yelling at cloud. Like, that's where there should be somebody, but that's about it. But that's all that always already existed, and it sadly probably still will, 420, even though it's turned in less of a protest is the word I'm looking for, and more of a celebration. But let's not celebrate kids getting stoned in front of Parliament.
Yeah, I agree. Leave the kids out of it. So you had, in our email exchanges, you mentioned about a time where you had tried to grow your own with a friend and you ran
Yep.
into some legal complications.
Yeah.
Tell me that whole story.
Yeah. So during the worst possible period I could have picked to do this, during it would have been long time ago enough where, first off, I didn't get any kind of record, and I'll be perfectly honest about it, because everything was given over to the prosecuting crown. They chose not to charge or give any record or anything, because basically because we were so stupid and we were dumb about it, and it was kind of like, yeah, you guys already punished enough. So I'll try to get long story short. So a friend of mine approached me going, hey, it's a good idea. And probably pretty easy. We should grow marijuana. I was like, I don't know. That sounds like a lot of work, but we were smoking at the time. And pretty much every smoker at one point or another decides, I'm going to grow marijuana. It just happens. And but a little bit more ambitious, where this person was like, let's do 3 grow ops. Let's do 3. What the hell? If we're going to do 1, we might as well do 3. This this seemed like a great idea. So we lined it all up, bought 3 what's called ballast lights, and got all the pots. You need the big pots for that. Tons of dirt, the seeds. It was a huge startup. It was a big pain in the butt. We managed to grow a little bit here and there, not really thinking of the places that we were using that power usage might get monitored somehow. This might raise a flag somehow. We were basically like half squatting behind like a friend's area of a business where it was, an area where it hadn't been used in years. And they're like, oh, yeah, I use that old storage area. No one will ever notice. Spoilers, somebody noticed. And yeah, so when they did, it wasn't like a big bust and this and that. It was like, we show up to do the watering or the changing of the lights one day, and hey, this is your stuff? And no. I'm like, well, let's talk to you. And it was a very sit down and talk, and all right, we know what you're doing, and we got a warrant for your phone, and there it was like, it was like your parents, hey, we know what you're doing, tell us everything. And anytime we kind of got caught in a lie, they'd be like, no, we know about your second grow up too. And we're like, okay, well, here's what we're doing. And they're like, so we haven't found any actual product, and we noticed you're not really selling. And we're like, yeah, because it's really, really hard, and it's not really going all that great. And it was our first time anyways, and so we hadn't produced enough. So it was kind of like, they seized everything, including, they seized everything. They fined us a little bit of money. Said if we did our 75 hours of community service and did all that, it would all be good. Because there, even at that point, there was rumblings of legalization happening. So I believe that even before, much like you're seeing in the States with Joe Biden kind of encouraging, not charging, there was already rumblings. I believe if it was, another drug or something else, that we would have been totally got the book thrown at us. It felt very friendly and like, I don't know, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but we didn't even need lawyers for it. It was kind of like, we'll let this go away if you do this, and that's that kind of thing. So, while we could have fought it and this and that, we're kind of like, well, that's me, my buddy just kind of, all right, let's kind of clean break it. But it was a jumbo pain in the butt. I would not recommend it, unless you know what you're really doing. And I think the fact that we didn't have any actual weed ready for sale or anything probably saved us, but it wasn't going well, and it took up way too much of my time. Like all the power to the people who do it, but not my thing.
Yeah, I remember one time, just out of curiosity, I looked at a book about growing marijuana, and I was really surprised, of how much work it entailed. It's not like growing tomatoes or something. It's not like just putting a seed in dirt or watering it. It's a whole process. Like it's a legit job. And so
Yeah.
I think that's why more people don't really go into that. You also mentioned going to Mexico to buy. I mean, that seems kind of that's a trip right there, man.
Well, sorry, that was just the more of an experience. So when I was trying to think back at my marijuana experiences, it wasn't so much that I went to Mexico to buy. It was literally, it was literally on a trip to Cancun. It would have been a graduation trip back, I want to say like 2023, 2024, Cancun. And one of the concerns as a marijuana smoker, I was literally like, well, am I going to be smoking marijuana in Mexico? And my friends were like, of course, that's the whole, that's where marijuana is from. Like, of course, you're not going to have trouble. And then I had other people going, no, don't. You're going to end up in a jail for 100 years. Don't do that. So I'm like, oh, geez. So I got down there and I was like, well, I'm going to enjoy some mezcal and, enjoy some sun and see what happens. And sure enough, when I went into town, I was offered very quickly. And it was, even, I want to say 20 years after, I will say this, my friend, it was awful. It was very expensive. And when you hear the term people call weed grass, I'm like, yeah, I can see why that, because it was like literally someone just went outside and just ripped some grass. So it was like, this is grass. It was awful, awful. And I might not have technically even bought marijuana in Mexico. Actually, technically, I might have just actually literally bought grass. That was my other looking back at marijuana experience. That would have been my international marijuana experience. The times I've been to places like in Canada, we enjoy going to Cuba, and I wouldn't even say the word marijuana out loud in Cuba. So
Oh
that's
yeah. So what was it like in Cuba? They're totally against any kind of marijuana usage there.
with like Canada has a pretty good relationship with Cuba, and we love vacationing there, and it's generally pretty cheap and a quick flight. But it's like it's kind of like Cuba's like like the mom of like the places, like as in like no messing around. She's always watching, and you get caught with marijuana. There it's not just a warning. It's like, it is a communist country. It's yeah. I think the times I've been to Cuba, I one time saw an older couple kind of like, hey, we got some marijuana. And I was just like, I am turning around and walking away. They're like, that is, nope, not going to happen. Not a place like that. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful country, and it's very, I have nothing but great things to say about it. Laws are laws for a reason, but I'm going to say always respect laws. But yes, I find yourself in Cuba, let just lose the word marijuana, weed. You wanna just enjoy their rum. When in Rome, when
Yeah.
in Rome.
Yeah, man, I definitely don't want to get locked up in Cuba. Although I would definitely love to go there one day. one thing you mentioned, you said that police officers are actually allowed to smoke. That's really shocking to me. So it makes me
Yeah.
wonder, what is it like when you apply for a job? 'Cause I know here in the United States, you have to get drug tests for pretty much just about everything. So when you apply for a job in Canada, do they drug test you at all? Or is it
So
just
that's
being drug tested for other substances that aren't marijuana?
great question. It seems here in Canada, yeah, right when you cross that border, drug testing really drops off as far as employment standards for some reason. I've never understood it, and as a redditor, I enjoy following media and U.S. Lots of things. I'm a big fan of my neighbors to the south, but yeah, for some reason, I've never seen a drug test before. I've been in the service industry. I've never had a high job where that would require that. But even talking to family, friends, I've had parents in be it advertising, government jobs, real estate jobs under heavy corporate banners where it doesn't seem to happen as much. I think, again, we're pretty liberal when it comes to marijuana. I remember, like, jokes on, popular television show. Like, I remember The Simpsons had a pretty funny marijuana joke, like, I want to say a decade before legalization. We've always kind of been known as the country where it's like, we're okay with it, like, we're not going to test it. We're really against driving under the influence. That's where I'll say Canada does get it right. And I'd actually like to see us get more strict on that. And that's always going to be a slippery slope. But yeah, again, it's probably remarkably just calm and kind of just there when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I know here in the United States, pretty much every job I've ever had, you have to get a drug
Really?
test. Yeah, and it's either like a piss test or a saliva test. The thing is, saliva test is just like 24 hours.
Okay.
So as long as you don't like smoke or anything beforehand, you're good. And usually the saliva test is like for little jobs where, low paying minimum wage jobs where it doesn't really matter, but then there's the piss test, which is like 30 days. What's interesting is I know like on Reddit, you'll often see stuff pop up. Like people will be like, how do I pass this drug test? What do I do? And the thing is that, again, like, I don't smoke or do anything like that. But when it comes to passing the piss test, all you have to do, from what I hear, is just buy the synthetic urine, and you can pass it pretty easily. And so, like, I don't understand how people fail these tests in the first place. And at the point is, I wonder why they even do them if they're so easy to pass. I know like people. I remember one time I was at the gym talking about this, and this one guy, he was a truck driver, and he was saying, "Yeah, I smoke all the time, and I just use a synthetic." And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, like, you're a truck driver driving a big rig, but it just kind of makes me wonder, like, what's the point? It's just, keeping up airs when, there are more important drugs out there to be testing for, but yeah,
Absolutely.
it's pretty interesting. So, you mentioned about like wanting to go into like the legal profession. Do you want to do anything like concerning cannabis in the legal profession, or is it's not related at all or anything?
I guess yes and no. Well, I don't. I would love to be able to, and it probably be many years of schooling to be a lawyer. I want to get into legal assistant. So it would be depending on who I'd be working for. I actually do want to get into helping and family law. So that would probably stay very away from anything marijuana, unless it was something like a father had been charged with distribution of marijuana and there was a mix up and he was having something and they had a lawyer and I was working for said lawyer. That would be the connection. And in that case, I wouldn't have a say, but I do like the idea of helping somebody, especially if that is there. So yeah, I guess it's a yes and no. I would say I would like to use almost I'm not ashamed or proud. I'm in between. There's a lot of cannabis culture that celebrates smoking and being proud. Say it was an instance of literally a lawyer saying, "Hey, Nick, I want to help this father out. He's been charged with having 31 grams on him. He insisted it was 29, and that's legal. So the poor guy might get his kids taken away. And tell me, does this make any sense? Do we have?" And I'll be like, "Oh, absolutely. Like, yeah, it sounds like whatever. Sounds like they definitely are getting screwed over by the law. And yeah, like I can see how 29 grams is what you would buy, and blah blah." And so helping out with knowledge, I could see that. But yeah, while I'm not ashamed, I'm not going to go advertise it. But I think just like anything in life, experience can be applied to anything, positive and negative. So make it positive and go from there.
So, what does the future hold in store for cannabis in Canada? So, it's totally legal. Are there any upcoming changes or developments that Canadians should be aware of?
Excellent question. First off, I'll say what is in the news and what is happening. So we brought up edibles and milligrams. There are heavy critics and proponents of what the milligrams are as far as what you can buy and such. That you mentioned that why people go to gray and black market, because there are some people who flat out don't want to smoke or vape. They want to be able to consume. So there is, I do believe that, and I do believe it'll change as far as what's going to be allowed as far as milligrams, edibles, consumables, beverages, and such. That will change. And like I said, we have the native shops that are kind of, like I said, I can get that high milligram edible and pay the same, and the government's going to see that it works out. They're probably kind of looking back. Hopefully they're looking going, okay, you know what, we can actually give 100 milligrams and make that legal, and people aren't going to be crashing into each other and falling asleep and flying jets and such. We can probably do that. Personally, I would like to see more variety, and I'm not saying variety like you need black, white, purple, green weed, but where the government and where the licensed shops can buy from, it really hinders them. The 10 shops within a mile of where I am sitting right now, they're all going to have the exact same products, and the differences are going to be maybe 5 to 10% in price. They're all going to be very similar. So it's hard to compete when you can only buy from the same spot, and then you get into them kind of competing with better service, which, hey, then I'm all for. If win me over with better service. But I would like to see very similar to the way we have our liquor being sold in Canada, in Ontario. I mentioned the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. That's the LCBO is the store you go to buy liquor in Ontario. You can't go to a store or like the grocery store or liquor, just the one place, the LCBO. But then they're owned by the government. They are able to they are, while it's a little bit criticized for how stringent it is, they do a great job of bringing in wines and alcohol from all around the world. They're very celebrated for that. And that's how I wish the marijuana industry kind of ran, where they should be able to bring in like products that are tested from, like, say, Amsterdam. I believe Uruguay, it's also legal. Like places where it's tested and legal, they should be bringing in products like imported marijuana and such. And that's where I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it change that model so you can have different shops. You could have like imported marijuana shops, and you could have craft marijuana shops, and I'd like to see that. And I would like to see lounges or safe places, almost like bars, where you can do that, very similar to cafes in Amsterdam. So those would be my three big things.
I'm surprised they don't have that already, honestly. So there's no like place where you can like go and just like maybe like smoke a joint and watch a game or anything like that. There's
Exactly.
nothing.
Like
Wow,
you
really?
could go outside, but that's the thing. Like, a bar would be like, they want you to buy, you might buy some nachos and this and that, but they want you to buy that $10 beer. So going outside and smoking, then coming in and having water and watching the game. That's the whole. Now, during the gray period, it was the only time I've seen this where it was the gray market shop with some odd laws, or sorry, they had some odd rules, like you couldn't wear a hat and you couldn't be on your phone, little things like that. But I remember they had a big area that was always kind of tarped off under construction, even though it never was. And when you'd ask, they'd be like, "Oh, it's going to be our lounge." So they eventually did, but I think they were waiting to put money into it to see if they'd get shut down. And eventually they had to shut down anyways. So And there was one, I remember one pot shop in Toronto when I was walking by. They had like a little like you couldn't smoke in the shop. Obviously, there's no smoking indoors, but they had a little like off to the side, a little classic Nintendo with some old couches and an old TV. You could just kick back and then the time I went back with a friend, I was like, "Hey, what happened to the Nintendo?" And they're like, "Oh, someone stole the controllers." And I was like, "That's not good."
Of
So yeah.
course, it's always somebody ruining it for everybody, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah. So
so I know we kind of touched on this, but I just want to ask, like, what other kind of social changes? Like, is the stigma surrounding cannabis, is it totally gone? Like, here in the United States, people, if you smoke, people kind of look at you like a pothead or a slacker. Is it still like that in Canada, or is it
uh
totally?
no, I feel yeah. I will say probably relaxed a little bit. More and more people smoking and giving it a shot, trying it out for that first time, and a little bit more acceptable, more safe. There's definitely times like I will say with the legalization and the stringent testing, like I do feel safer. I know there was times with black market products where something I might have been smoking might have been weighed down with some sort of chemical or such, where I'm like, oh, this isn't just weed, and this buzz I'm getting, I don't know if this is, I don't know if this is THC, kind of thing. So it has changed for that, and all around, I do think with something with so many moving parts, and like when you're talking weed, you're talking so many different things. I will say, passable, probably even pretty good, but I think it could be a lot better, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And I will relay back to, this is something that he's not the most popular person right now, our Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau. The idea of legalization was never to encourage people to smoke or to bring in tax dollars necessarily, or to be like, hey, we're Canada, we're cannabis, and to change our maple leaf to a pot plant. Like that was never the goal. The goal was to get black market off, to get take away people adding in drugs and weighing down, to take this money. The prime minister wanted to take this money and earmark it for rehabilitation, for treatment. So that was always the goal of legalization. I haven't heard of people necessarily smoking going down, but I haven't heard of the stigma getting worse. So all around, I'd say it's remarkable how it goes up and down, but it still just kind of balances in the end. I kind of look at my parents as kind of like the uh, the bar of what's acceptable. Where my parents both don't smoke. My dad might have smoked in his youth, but my mom is very, very against it. Former nurse, be it anything combustible. She just thinks, why bother? Why spend money? Why this? Why cough? Why resonate? Like she just thinks, why would you ever? She's slightly considered CBD for a wrist injury, like topical, but even then, she's like, there's better, more natural. Like I don't see it feels like trying to squeeze a circle into a square, kind of thing. And I slightly see her point, but I kind of use them as the benchmark. And I also kind of like wondered if I'd hear them kind of being like, oh my God, there's too many pot shops, old man yelling at cloud, or oh, there's kids piling up all over the place, stoned, almost like you answered. Like I kind of like listen to them. And no, it's been remarkably quiet and just there. Like even the little town my folks are up in very, very far northern Canada. I think there's like 6 shops that they want to go to, they could go to. And that would probably be the thing that the little complaint. There's just a little eyesore and probably too many. But otherwise, yeah, it's almost like business as usual.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the prime minister being unpopular. Is there a worry that if a more conservative party gets in power, that they could reverse the legalization of weed, or is it something that nobody's really worried about?
That's an excellent question because it was something I was kind of bringing up just recently with the possibility of elections coming up and such. I think putting that toothpaste back into the tube would be pretty much impossible. You would alienate a lot of voters, and the last election, the conservatives, to both applause and criticism, they actually came out as being a little bit more open towards marijuana and such. The last election we had was actually kind of the conservatives, without getting too political, it looked like they kind of mixed up their platform with the liberals when they came out. It was almost like they were cool with a lot of the stuff they weren't, and it actually seemed like the conservatives might be a little bit more quote unquote liberal with marijuana. I don't see that being an issue. I know I do. I would actually see that being a question, one of the first questions that in the next election run during the next campaign, Pierre Poilievre is the person who will be probably running against Mr. Trudeau if Trudeau does run again, be it a year or two. That'll probably be a question that'll be asked right away, and I'm excited and interested to see what his answer will be as well. Absolutely. Not a fear, but one of those things people talk about. Absolutely.
So I got two final questions for you, and then we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Sure.
One question is, what advice would you have for Americans? It looks like, our country could possibly be gearing up for a massive, legalization similar to what Canada has done. What are some advice that you have for Americans? Like what missteps, anything that happened in Canada that we should look out for in America? Or, I guess I'm just asking, like, what should we look out for?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because I did see a lot of the fumbles and like right at legalization, I think the actual rolling out of the carpet for legalization and purchase, like that was pretty shoddy, especially considering we already had shops open where probably the right thing to do would have probably like go to these shops and license them already and find a way to kind of turn that key instead of having them all shut down, then reopen. And it, like, don't get me wrong, like you have to watch that too, because you don't want to be rewarding, like that's a slippery slope too, rewarding quote unquote criminals, I guess, and saying, hey, Monday you were a criminal, Tuesday, well, now we're giving you. So I'd like to, I think, smoother transition. I would say the states should look at Canada and follow the model, but not that to 2018, 2019 model. I would say look at where we are now and probably the tweaks that we're trying to make, preemptively make those tweaks. So I would say the U.S. should use Canada as a case study of what to do and what not to do, and probably, like I said, do similar to what we're doing right now, and probably look at some of our amazing Indigenous people and what they're doing too, because I think they have it right. And I would say learn and probably keep it a little bit more umbrella uniform, like going state by state and province by province. I think that kind of muddies it too when you have different ages for this and that. I would probably try to keep it more uniform and follow up on if there's promise of drug treatment and help and rehabilitation that those funds are going to go to, show that taxpayers want to see that. If you're going to make promises and run platforms on that, I would love to see that. I'd love to see, if there's any problem with that kind of thing. Like, there's problems with a lot of drugs and such, but I'd like to see that the proof is in the pudding.
Awesome. So my last question is slightly off topic, but I'm always curious to ask people
Yeah.
who don't live in the country, what is your perspective and maybe just Canada's? I know you can't speak for all Canadians, but like, what's your perspective on the current political situation in the United States? It's looks like it's going to be Biden versus Trump again in November. How do you feel, and how do a lot of other Canadians feel about the current situation in America?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And while I'm not like huge into politics, I do enjoy sitting back and looking at the relationship, the very symbiotic relationship we have with the U.S. What happens there greatly affects us, and vice versa. Yeah, we see it as a little bit of turmoil, but also we're always in political turmoil, like as well, both in a good and a bad way. Like sure, like I don't exactly like Trump. I've never been a huge fan, even with his Apprentice days. I always thought he was a bit of an entertainer. I enjoy watching Seth Meyers and all the pundits making fun of him, and I think that's been comedy gold. And I don't necessarily dislike Biden either. I think they both, like, I think even they've even done some okay things, like Canada, quote unquote, doesn't really like Trump, we say, but Trump was pretty good for us with little things like the Alberta pipeline when Biden took over, and when that happened, like Canada as much as we're like, oh no, we like Biden, we don't like Trump. There was millions of Canadians that affected. That shut down a huge pipeline that environmentally probably better for the environment. That's a bit of a touchy subject out in Alberta, where that which also is the only place that has 18 years for marijuana smoking. When I was talking about Alberta, one of our provinces, but I think we just look back and kind of see it. There are some, sadly, there are those, there's, just like anywhere, there's Canadians going, those wacky Americans, they don't know what's going on. And then the same thing's happening here where we have our politicians very similar, just not on the same platform. All in all, I think the best thing is to always look, learn, and never get too up on your high horse because, the same thing happening everywhere could be happening here. People make fun of Trump and this and that, but we got a very unpopular prime minister that people love also. So when it comes down to it, I think our symbiotic relationship is probably a lot closer, and I think we're a lot more the same than sometimes we all want to admit. And I don't know, I don't think that's a bad thing. I love our neighbors to the south, and we have a very symbiotic relationship, and I think what's good for you guys should be good for us, and vice versa.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's a lot we can learn from Canada. I've been to Canada once, a long time ago. I think I was maybe in the fifth grade when I went there. And I was really surprised about just how, like, when I went to, I want to say it was Toronto, or
Okay,
I'm not sure, but
probably.
I was amazed with like how clean everything was. Like, I didn't see any litter anywhere, in Canada. I don't know if maybe it wasn't Toronto. I don't know if Toronto is a clean place. I know that's like the major city, but I was just amazed. Like, and everybody was so friendly there, and I was like, wow, this is an awesome place. So, and I hope to maybe one day go back and visit again. But
Hey, you're
this
always
has
welcome, my
been
friend.
awesome. This has been a great episode, Mick. And before I close out, I just want to say, do you have anything to promote? Do you have like any kind of podcast or anything like that you have and you want to get out there or?
While I don't have anything published per se, I am an avid Calvin and Hobbes fan. I am currently working on a retrospective review and just a dive into my favorite comic that 30 years after the ending of publication is still prescient, still lots of fans. And yeah, so I would say if you're a fan of Calvin and Hobbes, maybe look up podcast Calvin and Hobbes, and you might see something very interesting out there. It might be a chance to remember, do a little bit of laughing, and after this, maybe a smoke and a laugh is good for anybody.
Awesome. So when you say retrospective, is it like a podcast you're doing or a YouTube?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not published yet. It is Let's Go Exploring, and that's Let's Go Exploring Pod at gmail.com. It's myself and Owen. It is a little bit of just looking at the strip week by week. If you're a Calvin and Hobbes fan, basically it's doing a little bit of deep dive, some philosophical back and forth, some character study, and just trying to get the comic out there with Calvin Hobbes. It's like I said, it's been done for 30 years and there's still so many fans. And I think it should be one of those things that Calvin and Hobbes should be in everybody's life in one regard or another.
Awesome. Hey, when you come out with that retrospective, send me an email and I'll definitely promote it on my page. I'll be definitely interested in that. But
Awesome.
this has been a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. And you have a nice day, Mick.
Hey, thanks so much, Isaac. It was an amazing time. Thank you for having me.
Take it easy.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us for another enlightening conversation here on Bright Brainz. I hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your own bright ideas. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform or however else you listen to this podcast. Also, we can be found on all major social media. Just type in Bright Brainz with a Z. And remember, the brightest minds are those that never stop seeking knowledge.